Las Vegas, 1977. Elvis was halfway through Love Me Tender when a small figure stepped out of the shadows. Security froze, the orchestra stumbled, and 20,000 people held their breath. It wasn't a fan. It was his daughter, Lisa Marie. What happened next wasn't part of the show, yet it became one of Elvis's most unforgettable moments. April 9th, 1977. The Las Vegas Hilton showroom glowed like a palace. Neon spilled across the red carpets, and the air was thick with perfume, cigarette smoke, and pure electricity. It was Elvis Presley's third show of the week, and every ticket had been gone for months. Inside, 22,000 people filled the seats, couples in sequins, soldiers in uniform, grandmothers clutching scarves, and teenagers who'd saved for months just to see him once before it was too late. The lights dimmed. A single beam found the stage. Then that unmistakable voice, deep, velvet, shaking the room like a prayer. Love me tender, love me sweet. The band eased in behind him, brass sighing like wind through trees. Cameras flashed from the audience, tiny bursts of light catching the gold in his jacket. Elvis smiled, just a little. His movements slower now, softer, as if every word carried a memory. At the piano, Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend, kept a watchful eye. "He looks tired tonight," someone whispered. But still, the king gave his all. From backstage, a quiet pair of eyes watched too, eyes that mirrored his own. Lisa Marie, just 9 years old, sat cross-legged near the curtain. She'd arrived that afternoon, escorted quietly by her nanny. Elvis had kissed her forehead and told her to stay put during the show. But the sound of her father's voice, trembling yet strong, called to her like gravity. She peeked out. The crowd was a sea of faces, glowing under the spotlights. The music wrapped around her like warmth. For a moment, she forgot she wasn't supposed to move. Elvis reached the bridge. "For my darling, I love you." Something about the way he sang it tonight felt different. Softer, sadder, like a goodbye no one had prepared for. The fans could feel it too. A few in the front row even started crying. Then it happened. Lisa stood, slowly, heart pounding. She clutched the small toy microphone her father had given her earlier that day. "So you can practice like Daddy," he'd said with a grin. She didn't think. She just walked, past the ropes, past the sound crew, straight toward the stage. Security spotted her first. Joe Esposito, Elvis's stage manager, grabbed his earpiece. "Who's that kid?" "Stop her! Wait, no! Hold on!" Elvis turned his head. For a second, his face went blank. Then his eyes widened. Recognition. His little girl, standing just steps away from him, frozen under the stage lights. He chuckled, the kind of quiet laugh only a father gives. The band faltered, unsure if this was part of the act. The audience gasped, hundreds of whispers rushing like wind through the room. "Elvis?" Someone called from the wings. He raised one hand, calm. He didn't stop the show. He didn't call for help. He just looked at her, and something melted in his face. Lisa took another step forward, her small shoes tapping softly against the stage floor. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Daddy!" He knelt down, microphone still in hand, and said something no one could quite hear. But those close to the stage swore he whispered, "You want to sing with me, baby?" The crowd lost it. Laughter, cheers, tears. And for the first time in his career, Elvis Presley, the king, shared his stage with his daughter. As the music swelled again, Lisa took a deep breath. The mic trembled in her hands. Elvis gave her a reassuring nod. That's when something shifted. It wasn't just a concert anymore. It became a story that would outlive them both. Because in that single moment, the king wasn't just a legend. He was a father, and the whole world was about to see it. What would you have done if your child walked into your spotlight? Would you push them away, or let love interrupt the show? The orchestra waited. The crowd leaned forward. Lisa's lips parted. And the impossible began. The room held its breath. The band froze mid-note, waiting for a cue that never came. Elvis's blue eyes glimmered beneath the stage lights as he watched Lisa Marie, his tiny daughter, standing beside him with that trembling toy microphone. For a man who'd spent his life commanding arenas, this was the one moment that left him speechless. Joe Esposito, crouched near the soundboard, whispered into his radio, "Do we pull her back?" Another voice crackled. "Elvis says no. Let it happen." The crowd didn't know what to do. Clap, cheer, stay silent. Instead, a ripple of laughter and gentle awe spread through the room. This wasn't a planned act. There was no cue sheet for this. Elvis adjusted the mic stand down to her height. "All right, honey," he said softly, his voice audible through the speakers. "You ready?" Lisa nodded, her little curls bouncing, her grip tight on that microphone like it was the most important thing in the world. The band cautiously started again, a gentle strum, a swell of strings. The brass held back, sensing the intimacy of the moment. Then came her voice, barely a whisper, but real. "Love me tender, love me true." It cracked a little, but the sound, innocent and pure, cut through the noise like a prayer. The audience gasped. Some smiled, some wiped their eyes. Elvis chuckled softly. "That's my girl," he said into the mic, pride leaking through every word. He joined her on the next line, their voices blending, one seasoned and trembling, the other soft and uncertain. The Hilton ballroom turned into a cathedral of light. You could hear nothing but the music, the hum of the crowd, and the faint static of the speakers. In that moment, it wasn't Elvis the legend. It was just a father and his daughter. But then, something unexpected happened. As they reached the final verse, Lisa's microphone cut out. A low hum replaced her voice. Panic flickered across her face. Elvis reacted instantly. He stepped forward, lowering his own microphone to her mouth. "Go on, baby," he whispered. "They can hear you now." Her voice returned, echoing through 20,000 hearts. The audience erupted, clapping in rhythm, helping her finish the song. Security guards smiled. Even the camera crew, told to hold steady, were crying behind their lenses. Then came a flash. A photographer captured it. The king on one knee, his daughter beside him, their hands clasped around a single mic. That photo would later appear in newspapers across the country under the headline, "The King and His Princess." But inside Elvis, something shifted. Behind his smile, there was a glint of sorrow. Maybe he knew how fragile moments like this really were. He looked at her one last time before turning back to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice thick with emotion, "that's my little girl Lisa." Thunderous applause filled the room. People rose to their feet crying, shouting his name, her name. "Lisa! Lisa!" Lisa giggled, overwhelmed by the sound. She didn't understand the weight of what just happened. She only knew her daddy was smiling, and that was enough. The music faded out. The crowd wouldn't stop clapping, and somewhere in the back, Joe Esposito quietly wiped his eyes and whispered, "I've never seen him like this." For Elvis, that night wasn't about fame or glory. It was about connection. A piece of his heart walked out onto that stage and reminded him why he ever sang at all. But every high carries a shadow, because sometimes, when life gives us a perfect moment, it's the universe's way of saying goodbye. Would you have known it was the last time? Would you have sung louder, held tighter, stayed longer? Elvis didn't know it then, but he'd never share a stage with his daughter again. The next few seconds felt like slow motion. Elvis turned his head toward the orchestra pit and nodded gently. The musicians exchanged glances. No sheet music, no plan, just instinct. The conductor raised his baton, and the melody of "Love Me Tender" began again, softer this time, slower, like a lullaby meant only for two hearts. Lisa stood close, the microphone shaking slightly in her small hands. Her voice was faint, almost ghostly, but it carried. Every syllable hit like a heartbeat through the speakers. "Love me tender, love me long." You could hear people sniffling in the front rows. Women pressed tissues to their faces. Men looked down, pretending they had something in their eyes. At the back of the room, a waitress named Marie Collins, who had worked the Hilton showroom for years, whispered to a co-worker, "I've seen 100 shows, but never this." And she was right. Because in that moment, Elvis stopped being a performer. He was a father singing to his daughter, his legacy, his echo. Lisa giggled nervously as she missed a note. Elvis smiled, leaned in close and whispered, "It's all right, baby. Just keep going." His voice, though soft, carried through the microphone. The audience chuckled warmly. Then he joined her. Their voices intertwined, his deep and worn, hers light and bright. It was imperfect, unrehearsed, human. That's why it was magic. A low hum buzzed through the amps. For a second, the mic crackled, feedback. But Elvis didn't flinch. He reached over and steadied Lisa's hand, guiding the mic back to her lips. His touch said everything. "I've got you." The crowd was silent. Not the kind of silence that's empty, the kind that's sacred. Then came the line that broke everyone. "And I always will." Elvis's voice cracked. Just once, barely, but it was enough. His eyes welled up, and he turned his head away from the spotlight. The brass section held the final note longer than usual, filling the space he left behind. That single pause, the breath he couldn't take, felt like time itself had stopped. In that silence, everyone in the Hilton felt the same thought. Something is ending. A single camera bulb flashed, capturing the shimmer of a tear that rolled down his cheek. That photograph would later be found in an old fan magazine captioned, "The King's Most Human Moment." Lisa tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, are you okay?" He smiled weakly. "I'm okay, honey." But he wasn't. His body was already fighting battles no one could see. Exhaustion, pain, loneliness that fame couldn't cure. Yet, in that instant, he seemed lighter. He kissed the top of her head, held her hand, and finished the song. The crowd stood in one roaring wave, an ovation that shook the ceiling. The applause didn't fade for minutes. It rolled and rolled, people shouting, "We love you, Elvis," and "God bless you, Lisa." Elvis raised his hand, quieting them. Thank you very much," he said softly. Then, looking at his daughter, he added, "That's my girl." The band began to pack up their instruments. But the audience stayed standing, unwilling to let go of what they had just seen. Backstage, Joe Esposito was pacing. "You see that? I've known him 20 years. I've never seen him like that. Never." Marie, the waitress, later wrote in her diary, "I swear you could feel heaven open for a minute in that room." When Elvis and Lisa finally walked off the stage hand in hand, the spotlight dimmed, but the magic didn't fade. People kept talking, even as they left their seats. Strangers hugged. Grown men cried. The bootleg tapes from that night, scratchy, half-audible, almost lost to static, would later circulate among collectors. Fans said you could hear something unusual near the end. A faint sigh, followed by the soft sound of a child laughing. Some swore it wasn't just a laugh. They said it sounded like joy breaking through sadness. If you were there that night, would you have known you were witnessing history? Or would you have just thought it was another song? The father and daughter disappeared behind the curtain, leaving the crowd chanting their names long after the lights went dark. And behind that curtain, something unforgettable was about to happen. The cheers from the Las Vegas Hilton still roared like thunder as Elvis carried Lisa Marie off stage. His white jumpsuit shimmered under the dim corridor lights, and her little arms clung around his neck. The music had ended, but the moment wasn't over, not for him. Backstage was chaos. Assistants shouted, cables tangled, reporters waited near the door hoping for a quote. Joe Esposito tried to clear the path. "All right, folks, give 'em space," he barked. But Elvis kept walking, head low, holding his daughter like she was the most fragile thing in the world. He sat her down on a trunk covered in rhinestone capes. The noise faded to a hum behind the heavy curtains. For the first time all night there was silence. Just the faint hum of an amplifier cooling off and the sound of Lisa's soft breathing. Elvis smiled at her. "You were something else out there, baby." Lisa giggled, swinging her feet. Did I do good, Daddy? He brushed a curl from her face. You did perfect. You made Daddy proud. For a moment, he just looked at her, like he was memorizing her face, the kind of look people give when they know time is shorter than it seems. Joe Esposito peeked around the curtain. Boss, press is waiting outside. Elvis shook his head. Not now, Joe. Joe nodded and slipped away. Elvis took a deep breath. The air backstage smelled of sweat and perfume. He turned to Lisa again and said softly, almost like he was afraid someone might overhear, You know, baby, no matter what happens, you'll always have the music. It's ours. Nobody can take that from you. Lisa frowned, confused. What do you mean, Daddy? He smiled, but his eyes told another story. You'll understand one day. He kissed her forehead, lingering a second too long. A few stagehands nearby pretended to busy themselves with cables. One of them, an older man named Sam Turner, later said in an interview, it was like watching a man say something final, but trying not to scare his kid. Then, Elvis reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold locket, engraved with the initials LMP. He had kept it since her birth. Inside was a photo of her as a baby. He placed it in her hand. Keep this with you, honey, always. Lisa nodded, clutching it tight. A knock came from the hallway. Mr. Presley, time for your encore. But Elvis didn't move. He sat there, staring at the floor. Finally he sighed, stood up, and said softly, You know, darling, sometimes the best songs are the ones you only sing once. Lisa didn't fully understand. She just hugged him and whispered, I love you, Daddy. He hugged her back, whispering into her hair, I love you more. The echo of the crowd calling his name filtered through the curtains again. Elvis! Elvis! He looked at the stage entrance one last time, then back at her. Stay here with Joe, okay? I'll be right back. But something in his tone said otherwise. Elvis walked out under the lights again for the final encore. The crowd screamed as he began, Can't Help Falling in Love. His voice was steady, but softer than usual, as if he was singing the words to someone only he could see. From backstage, Lisa peeked out, watching her father in that beam of gold light. She didn't know it would be the last time she'd ever see him perform live, because just 4 months later, on August 16th, 1977, Elvis Presley would be gone. When the news broke, that same trunk she'd sat on remained in the Hilton dressing room, untouched for weeks. Inside it, someone found a folded handkerchief, a guitar pick, and a tiny note written in Elvis's handwriting. Lisa, never stop singing. Daddy loves you. The staff kept it secret for years. Later, a faint recording of that night, captured accidentally on a bootleg reel labeled Hilton Show 14C, resurfaced among collectors. In the background, between the applause and the music, you can hear it, Elvis's low whisper to his daughter. It's almost impossible to make out, but if you turn the volume up, you can hear him say, You'll always have the music. If you knew your next words might be your last, what would you say? Would you be strong enough to say goodbye without letting it sound like one? That night became legend, an unscripted duet that turned into a farewell song. The tape of that night didn't surface again for decades. It sat inside a dusty box in a collector's basement, labeled only Hilton 77. When it finally played years later, the sound was warped, muffled by age. But underneath the static, you could still hear it, a little girl's laughter and her father's trembling voice. The duet that had been forgotten now spread like wildfire, first through radio stations, then the early internet. Fans couldn't believe it was real. A lost recording of Elvis singing with his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley. Some called it an accident, others, a gift from beyond. By 2005, Lisa finally confirmed it herself. She released a digitally restored version of Don't Cry Daddy as a virtual duet, merging her voice with her father's from decades before. The moment went viral. Millions watched. Millions cried. Reporters asked her, How does it feel to sing with your dad again? Lisa smiled gently and said, It feels like he never left. But she never mentioned the Vegas night directly. Some stories, she once said, belong to the heart, not the headlines. Still, fans piece the clues together. The date, the crowd, the photo. The story of that concert spread like myth through fan clubs. One woman named Maria Collins, the same Hilton waitress from 1977, started a small online group called the Tender Hearts Club. Their mission, to keep the memory of that father-daughter duet alive. Every April 9th, members from around the world gather outside what's now called the Westgate Las Vegas Resort, where the Hilton once stood. They light candles, play the bootleg tape, and stand silently as the faint crackle of the song echoes from a small speaker. Some say when the tape reaches the final verse, it almost sounds like two voices are still harmonizing, one deep and faded, one young and bright. Was it coincidence or something more? Lisa herself visited once, quietly years later. She didn't speak to the crowd. She just placed a single white rose beneath the stage plaque that reads, April 9th, 1977. The king sang with his princess. Then she walked away without a word. People who were there said she looked peaceful, almost smiling, as if the echo of that night still lived somewhere deep inside her. Music journalists later called it the most intimate goodbye in rock history. But for Lisa, it was never about history. It was about memory, the kind of memory that hums beneath the noise of fame, soft but unbreakable. And somehow, every time her name appeared in headlines, that story returned, shared again and again by fans who swore they could still feel it. The tenderness, the heartbreak, the unspoken goodbye. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was proof. Proof that even legends, even kings are human first. Because behind every song, every scream, every sold-out crowd, there was always a little girl waiting backstage, listening, learning, loving. Years later, when Lisa performed her own shows, she'd often pause before her final song, look up toward the lights and whisper, "This one's for you, Daddy." And just like that night in Vegas, the room would fall silent. If music could carry love across time, how far would you let it travel? Would you play it again, knowing it might break your heart? The bootleg tape of that 1977 concert still circulates quietly among collectors today, each copy a little fuzzier, a little softer. But the emotion remains. Some say you can still hear him whispering in the final seconds, "You'll always have the music." And maybe that was the point all along. Today, the Las Vegas Hilton is gone. In its place stands the Westgate Resort, polished and modern, its walls lined with posters of new stars. But if you walk down the old hallway that once led to the main showroom, there's a quiet spot, one the staff rarely mention. Tucked between the souvenir shop and the bar is a brass plaque, polished by the hands of strangers. It reads, April 9th, 1977, the king sang with his princess. Every year, someone leaves flowers there. No one knows exactly who. Sometimes it's a single rose. Other times a folded program from one of Lisa's concerts. The security guard on duty, an old-timer named Earl, once said, "It's always the same perfume smell. Maybe someone wants him to know she's still singing." Inside the main hall, where Elvis once stood under the golden lights, the stage remains almost untouched. If you press your ear close to the wooden floorboards, you can still hear the hum of old speakers, ghosts of the amplifiers that once carried Love Me Tender into 20,000 hearts. Some nights, tourists swear they hear the faint echo of applause coming from the empty room. But maybe it's not the sound that lingers, maybe it's the feeling, because what happened on that stage wasn't just a duet, it was a reminder, a message wrapped inside a song. Elvis spent his life giving everything to the world, his voice, his energy, his soul. But in his final months, he gave something else, something purer. He gave his daughter courage, the courage to keep the music alive, and she did. Through every interview, every performance, every quiet moment, she carried that echo. Even years later, when life tested her, fans noticed it. The same softness, the same ache, the same unspoken promise that began in Vegas. A promise between father and daughter, between music and memory, between love and time. The story of that night isn't carved in marble or gold. It lives in whispers, in fans' hearts, in the static of that fragile bootleg tape. It reminds us that the most powerful moments are often unplanned. They're not scripted or staged. They happen when love walks into the spotlight, uninvited but undeniable. If you had one moment left to say what matters, to show what's real, would you take it? Maybe that's why the Hilton's old stage was never fully dismantled. Maybe that's why the lights still hum softly in the rafters, long after the audience is gone. Because some stages never go dark. They just keep the lights warm for when love returns. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes music can keep memories alive. And if you ever visit Las Vegas, find that brass plaque, touch it, close your eyes and listen closely, because somewhere in that silence you might still hear it. A father's whisper to his daughter, "You'll always have the music."